Diablo 4 beta is unfortunately over. After having invested a good chunk of time testing things out, I wanted to make a quick video on the feedback I have to give in the hope that you might find it useful while we wait for the official release. Jumping right in, I can say straight out of the bat that I was pleased with the overall state of the game. From a technical standpoint, I have not encountered major bugs or game-breaking issues, which made the experience smooth and generally enjoyable. Although it still lacked a fair bit of optimization, I was pleasantly surprised by how well the game ran on the different specs I was able to try. So even if you do not have the latest fashion in terms of hardware, you can rest assured that you'll still be able to slaughter demons with your friends. The art style is much more similar to the one seen in the two original chapters of the game, stepping away from the lighter and warmer colors of Diablo 3, which is absolutely a good thing in my opinion. Sanctuary feels once again like a dark place where evil awaits us in every corner, and that feeling gets even more intense while exploring the many dungeons scattered on the map. Both the soundtrack and the ambient sounds are absolutely breathtaking in my opinion, and I would easily rate them as the best I have encountered in any ARPG. The whispers, the noises, and the voices gave me the chills they were supposed to, so I really believe that Blizzard did an amazing job in that regard. Speaking of amazing jobs, I was kind of shocked by how huge the map felt despite being only one zone. The amount of stuff we could do is worthy of note, but I'm not entirely sure whether that's a good or a bad thing. Although it does make Sanctuary feel like a fully fleshed out world, and that definitely contributes to how immersive it feels, I did find that moving from place to place took me a little more time than what I'm comfortable with, and that map size became almost annoying in the main hub, with the time required to go from a vendor to the next being way too much. In addition to that, it seems that collectibles like Altars of Lilith might be reset after each season, which I think is a dreadful idea and would make the sheer size of the world feel like a burden. So I hope that collecting them once per character will be enough, although I'm terrified it's not gonna be. Moving on, I was happy to realize that the always online aspect of Diablo 4 did not bother me at all, despite going in with a pretty biased approach. Just to give you some context, I have been a huge fan of the Diablo IP since its early days, and I was really supportive of its single-player offline nature, so I went full-on berserk upon learning that this new chapter was committed to the MMO route. However, I am pleased to report that my worries were totally unjustified. Other than logging into the game and participating in some features like online events, you absolutely can still play the game as if it was a single-player offline experience, which is a perfect middle ground that I think will manage to ease into online gaming even those players that are offline aficionados. Moving on to the core feature of any ARPG worthy of that title, combat in Diablo 4 has a totally different pacing when compared to its predecessors, and in my opinion that is the best thing that they could have done for the health of the game. The ability to dodge attacks on a relatively short cooldown slows down the gameplay considerably, since there are plenty of mechanics that obviously promote using it in order to avoid a horrible death. However, moving out of the way with 100 monsters on screen would be rather difficult, which is why the game is not designed around having the same monster density as the one we have grown accustomed to over the years. That does not mean that we won't see an increase in pacing due to builds and gear getting better, because we all know that is for sure going to happen, but I do believe that pulling an entire map of mobs while zipping around like a madman is not exactly modern nor enticing gameplay, so I'm glad they went for a different approach this time around. That said, making the game more action-oriented has also created a substantial issue, since it is pretty evident that melee combat is way worse than ranged in pretty much every single aspect. There are plenty of bosses that often surround themselves with a damaging effect or constantly teleport around the battlefield, which makes them way harder to deal with if you are playing on a class that is heavily tied to melee range, such as a barbarian or a wild-shaped druid. This is a huge issue in terms terms of balancing how classes can approach the game, which is something much more complicated to handle compared to simply tuning numbers. In all honesty, I do not see an easy way out, since the only one that comes to mind would be to make close combat builds capable of surviving while sticking to their targets pretty much at all times, which would in turn make them pretty unkillable in PvP and just plain boring in PvE, since they could just stand still and do their thing, ignoring mechanics that are supposed to keep players engaged. This is also where the MMO aspect of Diablo 4 might fall short, since gaming communities tend to favor meta builds, and I'd prefer to avoid seeing people get refused in a group just because they play a melee class, which is something I can absolutely see happening if the game stays the way it was in this beta. Although I'm not sure exactly how, I think this is an issue that needs solving before release, or it risks ruining the experience for many players that might not enjoy the added complexity that melee builds currently have. Switching to a more positive note on the topic of classes, I feel that Blizzard definitely did their homework when it comes to design, which is really the only thing that makes sense looking at during a beta. I know that literally everyone is pretty pissed off that some classes dealt way more damage than others, and I absolutely agree that the druid was severely underpowered to the point of being almost unplayable. I for one could not bring myself to even attempt getting mine past level 13 because it really was a miserable experience, but remember that numbers are the easiest thing to tweak, so they are not worth obsessing over too much. If we take away how the different builds performed, which is of course an issue that needs to be addressed, I feel that all classes have a strong theme, a well-rounded toolkit and a fairly unique playstyle, while everything a barbarian does gives that meat grinder vibe that we know and love, splatting monsters with shockwaves and a variety of cool-looking weapon attacks. The rogue feels dynamic and bursty with its damage, which is exactly what I expect from an assassin-themed class. The druid has a great appeal with its ability to deal damage with both magic and wild shape, and once properly tuned, I do think it's going to be a pleasure to bash people in the face as a massive bear. The necromancer is by far the creepiest of the bunch. The trails of blood he leaves as his undead minions slaughter everything in his path is really cool looking, and perfectly in line with the vibe I am looking for when playing a dark-themed caster, while the sorcerer feels like exploding stuff is as natural as breathing, leaving behind only charred remains or shards of ice. The only thing that I believe is lacking when it comes to classes is a holy themed sword and board class like Paladin or Crusader, but if I were to guess, it is just a matter of time since I fully expect it will be added in the future. There are also some minor aspects of the beta related to items that I think made little sense. First, common and magical items, which are white and blue items basically, have once again no purpose whatsoever other than being salvaged into crafting materials, at least after the first hour of a character's life. I can understand the attachment since they have been a staple element of the Diablo franchise since the very beginning, but unless you want to visit the blacksmith every 5 minutes, you are kind of forced to leave them on the ground, so they end up as nothing more than screen clutter. I think it's about time Blizzard introduces an option to automatically pick them up and turn them into materials so that players do not feel like they're wasting resources all the time. Next on the list, I do not understand why you need to salvage an item to unlock its corresponding appearance instead of just picking it up. Found a really cool looking item with awesome stats that you want to stash since it's not for your build? Well, too bad, its appearance is going to sit there until you find another one that you decide to salvage. Do you need gold and would prefer to just sell the item? Well, tough luck, say goodbye to its appearance. I know that we'll end up salvaging so much that we'll still get all wardrobe options anyway, but forcing players to destroy an item to unlock its appearance seems really unnecessary when simply finding it was enough in other chapters of the franchise. So, after everything is taken into account, has Diablo 4 managed to match my expectations or not? For me, the answer is yes, but with some reserve. Good features like the vastness of the open world can become a burden if Blizzard decides that we need to return to all altars of Lilith every season. And although the combat feels amazing, its imbalance between melee and ranged could very well ruin the entire thing. With the game releasing the 6th of June, there just isn't a lot of time to address the issues related to combat, so that remains the problem I am worried about the most. Nevertheless, going back to Sanctuary is going to be a blast, and I cannot wait to share this journey with my longtime friends and with the new ones I'll make as I slay demons. In the meantime, I look forward to reading in the comments what is your opinion of this beta and what class you'll be going with first. There will be more content coming on Diablo 4 as we get closer to release, so make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. As always, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.